Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Wednesday, February 15th, 2017. Your Fourth Amendment rights should be secure. It's very clear that they can only conduct a search with probable cause and a court order. But American citizens are getting a different reading of the Fourth Amendment at airport security checks. I'm very troubled by this, and so far these are anecdotal reports. I want to be clear. But the other day I told you about the American citizen who works for NASA, who returned to the United States and was forced to open up his phone to customs officers. Now, we have another case just reported by the New York Times. An American citizen, Haitham El-Sharkawi, was about to travel from LAX to Saudi Arabia last week. He was stopped at the airport, questioned, handcuffed, questioned some more. And they demanded that he open up his smartphone. 34-year-old El-Sharkawi, an American citizen, was on his way to Saudi Arabia for a religious travel. And he was held there. He missed his flight. He was not reimbursed for the cost of the ticket for the flight that the customs agents caused him to miss. And they kept insisting that he had to open up his phone to them. So the New York Times is running a kind of, explainer about this. Do you have to open up your phone? Well, according to the authorities, the policies were expanded under the Obama administration, and in the last year that we have records for, 2015, agents inspected 4,444 cell phones and 320 other electronic devices. Now, I personally know of a case of a man who came into SFO, and they demanded to see his laptop computer. Now, we're told that all of this is about, protecting us from terrorism. But they found some child pornography images deep on his computer. He thought he had cleaned them off, and he ended up being prosecuted for that. And this kind of mission creep is something that I'm deeply concerned about. So, simple question. Can agents force you to unlock your phone or laptop? The answer, according to the New York Times, is simple. No. But they can ask you to comply voluntarily and make the experience rather uncomfortable if you resist. Travelers must decide how much trouble they're willing to put up with. Well, I reject this. We don't have to feel pressured at an airport to compromise our very critical constitutional rights. The Times goes on here, you may end up losing your device since agents could seize it for weeks before it is returned. They could also copy the data. Their policy is that your data must be destroyed as expeditiously as possible if it doesn't have any value to them. But who gets to determine that? El-Sharkawi was on his way to a pilgrimage to Mecca, and he said his payment for his Turkish Airlines flight to Istanbul was not refunded after he missed it. Can agents force you to turn over social media passwords? The answer again is no. But if you unlock your phone, chances are all you got to do is push that app, and it opens up just like on my phone. I don't have to enter my password each time I look at Facebook or Twitter. And it's because most people remain logged into their accounts. El-Sharkawi said he didn't give agents his social media passwords, but the officer who looked through his phone commented on his emails and his apps. He doesn't know if she looked through his social media accounts, he said. So what can you do about this? Well, you can demand a lawyer. And El-Sharkawi said that he asked for legal assistance. And he said, it opened the doors of hell when I asked for a lawyer. They just started attacking me verbally. Why do you need a lawyer? Are you a criminal? What are you hiding? This is flatly un-American. And it clearly violates our constitutional rights. And I want to see the ACLU and the Center for Constitutional Rights take up this cause. Because we shall not sacrifice our rights just so curious people can look at our phones. Now, I want to thank Carl Howard, who last week sent over an item from the Columbus Free Press in Ohio, and this is written by J.J. Ulm, Info Security for Protesters. Now, this applies as well if you want to try to secure as much as possible your phone or a computer before you travel. And J.J. Ulm writes, if you're going to a protest, you're not going to leave your phone at home, but before you go, turn off any fingerprint unlocking and change it to a password, PIN, or a pattern. You can't be forced to give up your password, but you can be forced to put your finger on the sensor. I think that is a very good idea. I have a new iPhone, and I didn't set it up for that fingerprint thing. This is, I think, a good argument for that course of action. And what else is advised here? I usually advise against letting Dropbox auto-upload your photos. An exception should be made for letting it back up photos that you might be forced to delete from your phone. They can be moved to something more secure later. In many states, the ACLU has an app just for this purpose. And the advice here is also to install Signal, set it as your default texting app, and then make sure anyone that you'll be texting about any important plans uses Signal too, because it is encrypted. Now, here in California, nearly 200,000 people who had to evacuate because they were afraid that the Oroville Dam was going to fail and come cascading down the Feather River into the Sacramento River Valley. Well, they've managed to drain the reservoir down about 50 feet. We're expecting more rain. A front is moving in tonight for the next few days, and they feel that they have enough headroom in the dam to accommodate this new flow of water. And the good news is that Governor Jerry Brown's request for disaster relief funds have been approved by the Trump administration. At least so far, he is not seeking vengeance for the staked-out positions about sanctuary cities and a possible sanctuary state policy here in California. And frankly, I guess Trump is just overwhelmed by the Mike Flynn scandal and everything else that's going on and decided not to take on that battle at this time. Now, the official leaks that are coming out of Washington are even greater than the water flow out of the Oroville Dam. And there is a new round of leaks fed to the New York Times, again from highly placed anonymous sources in the intelligence community. And they are playing the media here by funneling out information that is verified by present and former intelligence officials who are not named. And this continues, this whole cascade of information that sets up the notion that Russia is trying to manipulate the United States every which way. The new information, we are told, affirms that there were long-term contacts between the Trump campaign, associates of Trump who were not formally in the campaign, and unnamed Russian officials, described as senior Russian intelligence officials. Now, because we have no names of the Russians allegedly involved in these contacts, we're left to trust the media and trust the leakers. And I don't. Now, this all may be turning out, it may turn out to be true. But I have to stick to standards here, and my skepticism continues to be based on the lack of evidence that's been put out. Once again, we have to take it on faith. They tell us there were these many contacts, and then the agencies tried to learn whether the Trump campaign was colluding with the Russians on the hacking or other efforts to influence the election. And again, this is a trust statement. The officials interviewed in recent weeks said that so far they have seen no evidence of such cooperation. But the frequent contacts and the comments that Trump was making on the campaign trail allegedly led these officials, again, they're all anonymous, to be very, very concerned. The officials said that one of the advisors picked up on the calls was Paul Manafort. We've heard about this before. He was fired as campaign chairman back in, July or August? And the officials declined to identify the other Trump associates on the calls. But this is treated as fact. The calls and intercepted communications, says the New York Times, are part of a larger trove of information the FBI is sifting through, as it investigates the links between Trump associates and the Russian government, as well as the hacking of the DNC. Now, here again, I'm very concerned that we are conflating distinct different events or distinct different networks. And I remain unpersuaded that the DNC hacks and the John Podesta hacks were managed by Russians and that was explicitly fed to WikiLeaks. That remains unproven but widely believed. The officials cited by the Times would not disclose many details, including what was discussed on the calls, the identity of Russian intelligence officials, and how many of Trump's advisors were talking to the Russians. They do distinguish that these calls are different from the wiretap conversations between Mike Flynn, who just got bounced from the administration as National Security Advisor. But the cases are part of American intelligence and law enforcement agencies' routine electronic surveillance of the communications of foreign officials. And what's fascinating is to see the way different people perceive what is going on in Washington and the ouster of Mike Flynn. If you look at the so-called alt-right media, they're focused exclusively on the fact that this is driven by leaks. And while that's criticized by the corporate media, I think that is a fair angle to pursue. It's one that I pursue. I'm very uncomfortable with these faceless intelligence community operatives who can leak, with impunity. They're not facing exile like Ed Snowden or 35 years at Leavenworth like Chelsea Manning. If anything, they'll get promoted for this. And, as we'll cite in a moment, it undermines the very fundamentals of what we think is a democracy. So Trump has lashed out at the intelligence agencies again, saying that Mike Flynn was brought down by illegal leaks to the news media. Quote, from intelligence, papers are being leaked, things are being leaked. It's a criminal action, criminal act, and it's been going on for a long time before me, but now it's really going on, and people are trying to cover up for a terrible loss that the Democrats had under Hillary Clinton. Well, I'm not sure that's operative still, Donald. Nice try. And then out of nowhere, he tweeted today, Crimea was taken, in all caps taken, by Russia during the Obama administration. Was Obama too soft on Russia? So rather than deal with what his intentions are toward Moscow about Crimea, which I think is water over the dam, however you want to characterize it, and you can blame Obama for it if you want. But Crimea is not going back to Ukraine, and I think Trump is accepting that, but trying to modify the optics and the political price extracted from him. Dave Lindorf, who is a bright independent journalist, he's got an article that I'm citing here at Counterpunch today. He echoes something I said yesterday, that Mike Flynn was brought down by the very spying machine that he helped build and operate, hoisted on his own petard. And Dave Lindorf wrote a book about the impeachment of George W. Bush back around 2007 or so, maybe a little earlier. Anyway, he writes that here's a guy who knew all about our intelligence apparatus, and he was using unencrypted email, unencrypted phones, and texting to communicate with the Russian ambassador. I mean, maybe we should sentence Mike Flynn to watch that new TV reality game show called Hunted on CBS that I've been slamming here recently on the podcast. And Lindorf writes, what we're seeing here, besides the expose of a thoroughly inept and out-of-his-depth president, is the workings of the so-called deep state, the permanent power structure that really runs things in the U.S., which is taking advantage of its vast powers to rein in the efforts of a loose cannon, trying to steer things off on an unorthodox course. Lindorf writes, if the manner in which they are brought to heel is by having secret government forces like the intelligence services, which are unanswerable to anyone and which clearly have dirt on everyone, making them effectively immune from criticism and democratic control, if we let them handle the job, that means we no longer live in anything approaching a democracy. It's all just secret power games among elites in Washington. And we have to make sure that when they're pissing on each other, we don't get caught in the crossfire. And Devin Nunes, who is the California Republican who chairs the House Intelligence Committee, he just got promoted to that post in the past few months or so. He is a leading defender of government surveillance programs. But when he looks at Mike Flynn's exit, he says, the big problem I see here is that you have an American citizen who had his phone calls recorded. But Devin Nunes has been a solid supporter of the surveillance state in this country. He supports the collection of phone metadata that's been used in both the Flynn case and in this newly leaked trove from the New York Times about contacts between Trump associates and the Russians. And Devin Nunes is one of those people who's out there defending the privacy rights after, of course, promoting the violation of those rights on a regular basis. And Zoe Lofgren from here in California, along with Tom Massey, a Republican from Kentucky, back in 2015 introduced an amendment that would have required the FBI to get a search warrant in the exact situation that Flynn is facing. At that time, Nunes sent a letter to his colleagues opposing the measure. So, yeah, it comes back to bite you every now and then. And then little Marco Rubio, the senator from Florida, who has argued for expanding and permanently extending many of the NSA's surveillance programs, responded with shock and outrage upon learning in 2015 that the NSA was spying on the Israeli government and its contacts with American members of the House and Senate. So I think this is fascinating payback for people who have trampled our constitutional rights, but they want to defend Mike Flynn's. And Sam Husseini, who, along with Norman Solomon, runs the Institute for Public Accuracy, he's got a comment piece up at Counterpunch as well today, and he warns that many so-called progressives are, in effect, making an alliance against Trump with the most warmongering parts of the U.S. establishment. They are, in effect, buttressing incredibly dubious notions of U.S. victimology and demonizing official enemies that increase U.S. militarism and the likelihood for confrontation with Russia that could destroy the planet 100 times over. And Husseini writes, Flynn was compelled to resign in large part because what is euphemistically called the intelligence community apparently had recordings of his dealings with Russian representatives. This implies that people will be held accountable for their falsehoods if, and only if, their stances upset the CIA, the NSA, or the other spooks. And Husseini reminds us of a recent comment from Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader in the Senate, who said Trump was really dumb for attacking the intelligence agencies. Let me tell you, he said, you take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. That's what Mike Flynn and Donald Trump are experiencing. Jeff Sessions is resisting demands from Democrats to recuse himself from any role in investigating Trump and aides and the relationship with Russia. But Sessions is resisting. He says, I see no reason why I need to recuse myself, and Democrats have no real way to force him other than public pressure and trying to embarrass him. Every day I pause for a second and thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. Generous people like Andy Krieger, Arlene Montemarano. I think it was Arlene who said if I came to Washington, I could stay at her place. Thanks, Arlene. That's very generous of you. Jane Williams and many others. I appreciate your support, and I would like new people to join in. Come on over and help shoulder the load here, push the wagon, whatever phrase you like. Just log on to peterbcollins.com on any device, click the menu button, then pull it down, click on Become a Subscriber, takes you to the sign-up page, and faster than Who Shot Bob, you can select a subscription level that is comfortable for you. And I've got a new bonus book up for whistleblowers. Don Sokin's book about whistleblowers is now available for any new annual subscriber with a mailing address in the continental U.S. Well, I mentioned a moment ago a reference to the alt-right media. And it's interesting because I listen to a few minutes of Sean Hannity's radio show in the evenings here when I'm headed home. And he has taken up to gratuitous reference at all times to the alt-left media. To him, MSNBC is alt-left, I guess CNN is alt-left to him, and I don't know where that would put me. At any rate, the analysis of reaction to the Flynn departure here is that the more right-leaning news media focus on the leaks from Washington, while the corporate media focuses on the fact that he lied and the possible violation of law by making deals with the Russians when you are not, formally authorized to do so. For example, Trump tweeting yesterday, the real story here is why there's so many illegal leaks coming out of Washington. And today, just after he shaved, he tweeted, information's being illegally given to the failing New York Times and Washington Post by the intelligence community. NSA and FBI, ? Just like Russia. So it is interesting to see once again that we are divided in where we get our news and what we believe. Trump held the long-awaited meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House today, and he surprised Bibi, I think, by demanding that Netanyahu negotiate and be willing to give up some settlements, or at least some expansion of settlements. And he also surprised many. Trump said, I'm looking at 2 states and 1 state. I like the one that both parties like, referring to Israel and the Palestinians. I can live with either one. So Trump here is now dispensing with the standard American policy since Bill Clinton was president. And that is that we promote the idea of 2 peaceful states coexisting and not trying to force the Palestinians into Israel and not allowing Israel to just decimate the Palestinian population and push them into the Mediterranean. So Trump did tell Netanyahu to hold back on settlement construction in the West Bank. And he said, as with any successful negotiation, both sides will have to make compromises. You know that, he said to Netanyahu, right? And as we've been discussing, Jared Kushner has been put in charge. He is hardly an unbiased guy. He is so pro-Israel, it's almost impossible to describe how deep that is. But they have this idea for a pan-Arab deal, essentially coming to the Palestinians last after they've built a framework with the other Arab neighbors. And I'm open to any approach. But by dispensing with the 2-state solution, or at least making it disposable at this point, I think Trump has made a negotiating blunder. And I remain skeptical that the Israelis are willing to compromise with the Palestinians. They simply want to run out the clock and gum it to death and build more settlements and just marginalize the Palestinians incrementally over time. So it'll be interesting to see what else comes out of the meeting with Netanyahu. And he came in at a time when the White House is in such chaos and disarray that he actually made things seem stable for a few minutes. Now, when Trump backs away from the 2-state solution, it reminds me of the Obamacare issue, where he's willing to repeal the 2-state solution, but he doesn't have a replacement in mind. And applying that to the health care debate here in this country, the self-fulfilling prophecy that Obamacare is a disaster, that it's going to crumble. Well, this is playing out as the Republicans dither over what to do. They know they have the votes to repeal Obamacare. They don't have any votes or any plan of how to replace it. And my grammar wasn't very good there. I apologize. At any rate, we now have a major defection. The Humana Health Insurance Company is bailing out. They have informed the government that they will not participate in 2018 in any Affordable Care Act markets. And this could be the actual plan of the Republicans, is just to gum this to death, run out the clock, and allow the insurance industry to kill Obamacare for them. Now, they might think that's a neat solution that doesn't have their fingerprints on it. But people will die. Here in California, only 7% of the population today doesn't have health insurance. Now, I've got my issues with Obamacare. It's got a lot of problems. But the idea that you can just cut off millions of people and say you're on your own, see if you can afford to buy insurance on the open marketplace, and really good luck to you, that's not acceptable. So it remains to be seen where this all goes. But it is troubling, and people are uncertain as to how it's going to be resolved. Well, I had a whole package prepared for you today about Andrew Puzder, Trump's embattled nominee for Secretary of Labor, and how 7 Republican senators have been withholding their support from Puzder, and how he first became a mob lawyer, actually a lawyer for a mobster, as he represented Morris Schenker, who was accused and convicted of bilking $34 million out of the Teamsters Pension Fund. That was the early history of this man who was part of Trump's wrecking crew to take out the Labor Department. And just as I sat down to the microphone a few minutes ago, it was announced that Andrew Puzder has withdrawn his nomination, and Trump will find another union-busting asshole to run the Department of Labor. General Mattis, the defense secretary now, was in Brussels warning the members of NATO to pay up or, well, the bland threat is that the U.S. will dial back its support of NATO. Now, only 5 of the 28 members meet the standard of spending at least 2% of their gross domestic product on defense. The ones who make the grade are the U.S., Britain, Poland, Greece, and Estonia. So, for example, Germany is supposed to spend 2%. They spend 1.1%. France is under budgeted at 1.7%. Italy, 1.1%. Spain, 0.9%. And this means that the United States is paying more than its share of the cost of NATO. But Trump, like so many things, exaggerates this immensely. What's 22 into 75? Well, it's a factor of 3 plus. So Trump exaggerated by 3x. He said that the United States was paying 75% of the load of NATO. The actual figure is 22%. The newly promoted deputy director at the CIA is dodging a request to give a deposition in the case up in Spokane against the contractors who devised the torture tactics for the CIA, James Mitchell and Bruce Jessen. They got $80 million for their trouble, and they're in a civil case where some of their victims have sued. And the defendants here, Jessen and Mitchell, and their lawyers, are trying to get Gina Haspel, a career CIA officer recently appointed to the number 2 post, to provide a deposition about her pivotal role in the CIA torture program, the destruction of the videotapes of torture sessions, and she is resisting. And it remains to be seen. The consultants, the psychologists, Mitchell and Jessen, claim that if she doesn't testify, that they will be denied important information they will be disadvantaged in arguing that their actions or inactions were within the scope of legally and validly conferred authority. So they're dodging that once again. And this one's not going to end well. The Republican-led Senate is moving to block an Obama-era regulation that would prevent an estimated 75,000 people with mental disorders from being able to purchase a firearm. And let's put this in straightforward English. Republican senators are considering passing this bill that's already been passed by the House that would enable people who are considered to be mentally ill by virtue of their Social Security payments to purchase a weapon when today they are not able to do so. Who are they serving there? The only entity that can benefit from this is the manufacturer of guns and ammunition. And finally today, I've been looking for room for this. I hope you can hang on to listen, because Gary Chu has a fresh film review of a movie that opens this Friday called A Cure for Wellness. Take it away, Gary.
A large financial deal is about to be signed off on, but the required signature for the paperwork is that of a man who's taken time off from his New York office for R&R at a remote mountain retreat in Switzerland. Executives at the home office are shocked when they get a handwritten note from their absent boss saying he's found something more life-affirming and won't be returning to the big, wide world of high finance in the Big Apple. 3 powerful board members, quivering at their conference table in a towering skyscraper, summon one of their young executives to immediately fly to Switzerland and fetch the AWOL CEO. If the merger they want to quickly accomplish doesn't come off, the firm stands to lose a fortune. Cue the money. Lockhart, played by Dane DeHaan, is the lucky guy who gets the board's order to make an urgent trip to the idyllic but spooky wellness center in the Swiss Alps, where the CEO appears to be receiving terribly expensive but miraculous treatments of some sort. DeHaan had the role of Lucien Carr in the not-so-delightful photoplay called Kill Your Darlings. DeHaan was buddied up with 2 other actors in that movie. They were playing Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg in the 2013 release, with Daniel Radcliffe in the Ginsberg role. Arriving in Switzerland, Lockhart finds it almost impossible to subsequently leave the ancient complex where elderly patients walk about the manicured grounds or play volleyball, badminton, or croquet. Yes, it's lovely among the lofty peaks at this historic array of large, foreboding edifices, but even more creepy, whether in blinding sunlight or dead of night. Hospital staff demand all patients drink copious amounts of the local mountain water, as it purports to hold the secret to getting well from whatever it is that ails them. That, according to Volmer, the chief physician. Jason Isaacs is cast as Volmer. Now that name reminds me of Lord Voldemort. What's the reason for that? Well, Isaacs, who was cast as Lucius Malfoy in the adventurous and harrowing Harry Potter smashes, is Volmer in A Cure for Wellness. By now you must be getting the drift. This is a sort of Potterish story, but more contemporary. But not all that contemporary, as the healthcare professionals at this elevated retreat have looks and reactions of Nazis, but with nary a swastika or stormtrooper in sight. On the other hand, though, there is the nubile and barefooted Hannah, a part handled by Mia Goth. Oh, that's spelled G-O-T-H, G-O-T-H. And just speaking her name makes me think of Marty Feldman atop an old castle tooting his horn. Now, please don't think I'm trying to imply that A Cure for Wellness is outrageously funny like a movie Mel Brooks might do. Director Gore Verbinski is the man who put The Cure in this new release. A Cure for Wellness is entertaining and creepily suspenseful, and in a grim way, occasionally pretty damn grisly. Definitely not for the kiddies, folks. DeHaan, by the way, isn't an emerging actor out of Germany or Scandinavia. He's Pennsylvania-born in Allentown. It's Dane's eyes that do it for you, and so do Mia Goth's peepers do the trick. In fact, all actors in this creaky, edgy, clean film have faces you can't forget. Some of them whether you want to or not. I've avoided relating much of what happens. You really need to be nearly out of the loop in order to get the appropriate voltage of jolts that come, what with all the surprises Verbinski has laid into this bracing film. I will caution you, though, keep your eye on the tall, weird figure Lockhart spies on in the middle of the night, as the slim, weird figure pushes a gurney around the wellness center grounds with what looks to be a corpse on it. Oh, another semi-spoiler, watch for the quick shot of Slender Man in an old photo. It shows early on in the film. And more of this mysteriously invented online craze of a faceless lurch-like creature comes near the end of the movie, when the vintage black-and-white photograph comes back into play. Then you must hurry to your TV to see the currently running HBO documentary, Beware the Slender Man. Alas, it will chill your blood for real. For the Peter B. Collins Podcast, I'm Gary Chu in Sacramento.
And thanks for that movie review, Gary Chu. I'll be checking out A Cure for Wellness on the big screen soon. I remain Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling.